I stood there watching Sheriff Karen order her deputy to place orange cones across my driveway. My own driveway. The one I had built with my bare hands 20 years ago. She turned to me with that smug smile I had come to hate and said the words that would change everything. "This is county property now. You have 24 hours to find another way to your house, or find another house." That was the moment I realized Karen had no idea what she had just done to herself. 20 years. That is how long I had called this mountain my home. Every morning I would step out onto my front porch and breathe in the crisp air that smelled of pine and possibility. My driveway wound down through the trees like a gentle river, connecting my little slice of heaven to the main road below. I had built that driveway myself, every stone placed by hand, every curve carved to follow the natural flow of the land. It was not just a path to my house. It was a piece of my soul embedded in the earth. The mountain community was small but tight. We all knew each other. We helped when help was needed and minded our own business when it was not. For 2 decades, this arrangement had worked perfectly for everyone involved. Then Sheriff Karen moved in next door. At first, she seemed pleasant enough. A middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She introduced herself on a sunny Tuesday morning while I was checking my mailbox. "I am Karen Mitchell," she said, extending a firm handshake. "Just moved into the place next to yours. I work for the county sheriff department." I welcomed her to the neighborhood and offered to help if she needed anything. She smiled and thanked me, but there was something in her eyes that made me uneasy, something calculating. Over the next few weeks, Karen would stop by occasionally to chat. She asked a lot of questions about property lines and local regulations. Questions that seemed innocent at the time but would later reveal themselves as reconnaissance. "That is quite a driveway you have there," she said one afternoon, staring down the winding path I had spent months perfecting. "Must have cost a fortune to build." "I built it myself," I replied with pride. "Took me the better part of 2 summers, but it was worth every blister." Karen nodded slowly, her eyes following every curve of my handiwork. "Interesting," she murmured. "Very interesting." I should have paid more attention to that tone, should have recognized the warning signs. But I was content in my mountain paradise, trusting in the goodness of neighbors and the peace I had worked so hard to build. Life was simple then. I would wake up each morning grateful for the quiet beauty that surrounded me. My property was my sanctuary. My driveway was the gateway to everything I loved. And Karen was just another neighbor in a community where neighbors looked out for each other. How wrong I was about everything. The first attack came on a Thursday morning in late spring. I was having my coffee on the porch when Karen marched up my driveway with a folder clutched in her hands and murder in her eyes. "We need to talk," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I set down my coffee cup and stood up slowly. This was not the same woman who had introduced herself with a smile just months before. This Karen was all business and barely contained rage. "Good morning to you too, Karen," I said, trying to keep things neighborly. "What can I do for you?" She slammed the folder down on my porch railing with enough force to make the wood shake. "Your driveway is on my property. I want it moved. Now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her in complete confusion, trying to process what she had just said. My driveway, the one I had built 20 years ago, on her property. "I am sorry, what?" I managed to stammer. Karen opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers covered in numbers and survey marks. "I had my property surveyed last week. Your entire driveway runs through my land. That makes it trespassing, and I want it stopped immediately." I picked up the papers with shaking hands. The survey looked official enough, but something about it felt wrong. The measurements did not match what I remembered from when I had purchased my property decades ago. "Karen, there has to be some mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I have been using this driveway for 20 years. The previous owner of your land never had any issues with it." Her laugh was cold and bitter. "The previous owner was a fool who did not know his rights. I am not. You have 30 days to build yourself a new driveway on your own land, or I will have this one blocked off permanently." My heart was pounding now. The papers in my hands felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. This could not be happening. Not after all these years. Not when this driveway was more than just a path to me. "Can we not work something out?" I asked, hearing the desperation creeping into my voice. "Maybe we can establish an easement or come to some kind of agreement." Karen stepped closer, and I could see the badge clipped to her belt. She wanted me to see it, wanted me to understand that she was not just my neighbor anymore. She was the law. "The only agreement I am interested in is you staying off my property," she said, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "And just so we are clear, I have friends at the county office who will make sure any legal challenges you might be thinking about disappear real quick." She gathered up her papers and turned to leave, but stopped at the edge of my porch. "30 days," she repeated. "After that, I start treating you like any other trespasser." I watched her walk back down my driveway with her head held high and her shoulders squared. She moved like someone who had never lost a fight and never planned to start. That night I sat on my porch until well past midnight, staring down the driveway that had been my pride and joy. The same path I had walked thousands of times now felt foreign and threatening. Karen had poisoned it with her accusations and ultimatum. I knew she was wrong, had to be wrong, but I also knew she wore a badge and had connections I did not. For the first time in 20 years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Karen did not wait 30 days to start her war. The harassment began the very next morning. I was barely awake when I heard the knock on my door. Hard, authoritative knocks that demanded immediate attention. I stumbled out of bed and opened the door to find a young deputy standing on my porch with his hand resting on his utility belt. "Morning, sir. Deputy Collins with the Sheriff Department. We received a report of suspicious activity at this address. Mind if I come in and take a look around?" I rubbed my eyes and tried to make sense of what was happening. Suspicious activity. What kind of suspicious activity? Report says possible drug activity. Someone called in saying they saw unusual traffic coming and going from your property at all hours. My blood ran cold. There had been no unusual traffic, no visitors at all actually, but I knew exactly who had made that call. "Officer, I live alone up here. The only traffic on my property is me coming and going from work. Someone has given you false information." Deputy Collins nodded politely but pushed past me into my house anyway. "I am sure that is the case, sir, but we have to follow up on all reports. You understand?" He spent 20 minutes going through my home, looking in closets and cabinets, asking questions designed to make me feel like a criminal in my own house. He found nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. "Well, everything looks fine here," he said as he prepared to leave. "But we will probably need to do these wellness checks regularly just to be safe, county policy and all." After he left, I stood in my living room feeling violated and angry. This was not coincidence. This was Karen flexing her muscles, showing me what she could do with a simple phone call. The calls continued throughout the week. Different deputies each time, all responding to anonymous reports of everything from domestic disturbances to illegal dumping. My quiet mountain home had become a crime scene in the eyes of the sheriff department, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But Karen was just getting started. The citations began the following Monday. Violation for improper mailbox placement. Warning for overgrown vegetation near the roadway. Notice of non-compliance for a burn pile that had been there for 15 years without complaint. Each citation was signed by Sheriff Karen Mitchell personally. She was using her badge like a weapon, turning every aspect of my life into a potential violation. I would come home from work to find orange tickets stuck to my door like accusatory fingers pointing at crimes I had never committed. The worst part was watching my neighbors begin to avoid me. Karen had been busy spreading her poison throughout the community, telling anyone who would listen that I was a troublemaker who refused to respect property rights. "I heard you are having some legal troubles," said Mrs. Henderson from down the mountain when I ran into her at the store. "It is not legal trouble," I tried to explain. "It is a misunderstanding about property lines." But she had already turned away, clearly uncomfortable with being seen talking to the neighborhood pariah. Karen had managed to turn my sanctuary into a prison. Every knock on my door filled me with dread. Every drive up my own driveway felt like trespassing. She had weaponized the very system designed to protect citizens and turned it against me. Late at night, I would lie in bed listening for the sound of approaching vehicles. Karen had made it clear that she could send deputies to my door any time she wanted, for any reason she could invent. My home no longer felt safe. The psychological pressure was crushing. I began to question everything. Maybe she was right about the property lines. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe it would be easier to just give up and move away. That was exactly what she wanted me to think. The final blow came on a gray Tuesday morning that I will never forget. I was getting ready for work when I heard vehicles coming up my driveway. Not just one vehicle, several. I looked out my window and felt my heart sink into my stomach. Karen was leading a convoy of county trucks up my driveway like some kind of military operation. Behind her were two deputies, a county surveyor, and what looked like a road crew. I ran outside still in my pajamas, panic rising in my throat like bile. "What is going on here?" I shouted as Karen climbed out of her truck with a clipboard in her hands. She looked at me with the satisfied expression of someone about to deliver a killing blow. "County business," she said simply. "We are here to install barriers across the portion of this access road that crosses county property." "County property, this is my driveway." Karen held up a legal document that looked official and terrifying. "According to this court order, signed yesterday by Judge Morrison, this entire access route is now classified as an illegal encroachment on county land. The barriers go up today." I stared at the paper in her hands, the words swimming in front of my eyes like alphabet soup. Court order, Judge Morrison, illegal encroachment. The legal language was designed to sound authoritative and final. "You cannot do this," I said, hearing my voice crack with desperation. "This is my only way to get to my house. You cannot just block off my driveway." "I am not blocking your driveway," Karen replied with mock innocence. "I am protecting county property from unauthorized use. If you want access to your house, you are welcome to build a new driveway on your own land." I looked around at the steep terrain surrounding my property. Building a new driveway would be nearly impossible and certainly cost more money than I had. Karen knew this. She had planned this. "This is harassment," I said, my voice rising with anger and fear. You are abusing your position to steal my property." Karen stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her cheap perfume and see the cold calculation in her eyes. "Careful now," she said in a low voice. "Making false accusations against a law enforcement officer is a serious offense. I would hate to have to arrest you for obstruction." The road crew was already unloading concrete barriers from their truck. Big, ugly blocks designed to stop vehicles permanently. They were going to turn my beautiful winding driveway into a dead end. "Please," I said, all pride forgotten. "You have to know this is wrong. This driveway has been here for 20 years. I built it myself. It is not hurting anyone." For just a moment, something flickered in Karen's eyes. Maybe conscience, maybe humanity, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Should have thought about that before you decided to build on county land," she said, turning back to her clipboard. "Boys, let's get these barriers in place." I stood there helplessly as they destroyed my connection to the outside world. Each concrete block felt like a coffin nail being hammered into the life I had built. The sound of heavy machinery echoed through the mountains like funeral bells. When they were finished, Corinne walked back to her truck with the satisfied air of a job well done. She paused before getting in and looked back at me standing there in my pajamas beside the concrete wall that now blocked my driveway. "You have got 48 hours to find alternative transportation arrangements," she called out. "After that, if I find you trying to move these barriers or access this road, I will arrest you for destruction of county property." As her convoy drove away, I was left standing alone beside the ruins of my life. The driveway I had built with love and sweat was now a monument to Corinne's cruelty. My mountain paradise had become my mountain prison. That night, I sat on my porch and stared at those concrete barriers until my eyes burned with tears of rage and helplessness. Corinne had won. She had used her badge and her connections to steal something that could never be replaced. Or so she thought. That night, something inside me changed. The helpless victim that Corinne had been tormenting for months died beside those concrete barriers. What emerged was someone harder, someone angry, someone with nothing left to lose. I did not sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began to dig. If Corinne wanted to play legal games, then I needed to understand the rules. I started with the basics: property records, easement laws, and county regulations. What I found in those first few hours of research was interesting. What I found after a week of digging was explosive. Corinne's survey was a lie, not just wrong but deliberately falsified. I pulled the original property records from when I bought my land 20 years ago. I compared them with the county's official survey maps. I even found the paperwork from when I first built my driveway and applied for all the proper permits. My driveway was not on county property. It never had been. In fact, according to the original surveys, my driveway was built entirely on an established right-of-way that had existed for over 50 years. But that was not the most interesting thing I discovered. The most interesting thing was that Corinne's property had no other legal access to the main road. When the original parcels were divided decades ago, the developers had assumed that all property owners would continue to use the shared access route that ran right through the middle of what was now my driveway. Corinne's house, her mailbox, her septic system, her power lines, everything, depended on the same access route she was trying to steal from me. I leaned back in my chair and felt a smile spread across my face for the first time in weeks. Corinne had been so focused on stealing my driveway that she had never bothered to research her own property rights. She had made a critical error, one that was about to cost her everything. I spent the next several days becoming an expert in property law. I read every easement statute, every access right regulation, every county ordinance that might apply to my situation. I learned about adverse possession, prescriptive easements, and landlocked property rights. But most importantly, I learned about a little-known county regulation that required all property owners to maintain legal access to public roads. Properties without legal access could be declared uninhabitable and condemned by the county. Karen's property was about to become very uninhabitable. I also began researching Karen herself. What I found painted a picture of a woman who had been using her badge to intimidate people for years. There were complaints filed against her that had mysteriously disappeared, reports of harassment that had been buried by friendly judges. But there were also patterns. Karen always picked on people she thought were weak and isolated, people who would not fight back, people who would just give up and move away rather than challenge her. She had never faced someone who was willing to play her own game. I made careful copies of every document I found. I built a timeline of Karen's harassment campaign. I documented every false citation, every illegal search, every abuse of power she had committed. Then I began making phone calls. The first call was to a property attorney in the city. The second was to the county surveyor's office. The third was to a very interesting gentleman at the state attorney general's office who specialized in police misconduct cases. By the end of the week, I had assembled a legal strategy that would have made Karen proud if she had been smart enough to understand it. She had taught me well in the art of using bureaucracy as a weapon. Now it was time to turn that weapon back on her. I sat on my porch that Friday evening, looking at those concrete barriers with completely different eyes. They were no longer symbols of my defeat. They were evidence of Karen's crime, proof that she had abused her authority to steal property that belonged to me. More importantly, they were proof that she had cut off her own access to the outside world. Karen thought she was a chess master playing against a beginner. What she did not realize was that she had been playing checkers while I learned to play chess, and I was about to show her what checkmate looked like. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Monday morning came with the crisp clarity that only revenge can bring. I had spent the weekend putting the final pieces of my plan into place. Every document was filed. Every phone call was made. Every trap was set. Karen had no idea what was coming. My first stop was the county surveyor's office, where I met with a pleasant woman named Janet, who had been very interested in my phone call the previous week. "So you are telling me that Sheriff Mitchell blocked access to your property based on a fraudulent survey?" she asked, spreading my documents across her desk. "That is exactly what I am telling you," I replied, "and I have the original property records to prove it." Janet studied the papers with the practiced eye of someone who had seen her share of property disputes. After 20 minutes of careful examination, she looked up at me with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Johnson, this is quite serious. If what you are showing me is accurate, then the sheriff has not only violated your property rights, she has also rendered her own property legally inaccessible." "That was my understanding as well," I said, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. Janet made several phone calls while I waited. Each conversation was brief and professional, but I could hear the concern in her voice growing with each call. "I am going to need to do a complete resurvey of both properties," she finally announced. "And I am going to need to file a report with the county about the fraudulent survey that was used to justify blocking your access." "How long will that take?" I asked. "48 hours," she replied. "Maybe less if this is as clear-cut as it appears to be." My next stop was the county courthouse, where I filed a formal complaint against Sheriff Mitchell for abuse of authority, harassment, and property theft. The clerk who accepted my filing was a nervous young man who clearly did not enjoy taking complaints against law enforcement. "Are you sure you want to do this, sir?" he asked. "These kinds of complaints can be difficult." "I am very sure," I replied. My final stop was the office of the county attorney, where I had scheduled a meeting with Assistant County Attorney Rebecca Martinez. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who had built a reputation for not backing down from difficult cases. "This is quite a story, Mr. Johnson," she said after reviewing my evidence. "If what you are alleging is true, Sheriff Mitchell has committed several serious violations of both her oath of office and county law." "I have documentation for every claim I am making," I said, sliding another folder across her desk. She spent an hour going through my evidence, making notes and asking pointed questions. When she was finished, she leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. "I want you to know that investigating a sitting sheriff is not something we do lightly," she said. "But based on what you have shown me, I think we have grounds to proceed." "What happens next?" I asked. "Next, we wait for the surveyor's report. If it confirms what your documents suggest, then we move forward with formal charges. In the meantime, I would advise you to document any further harassment or intimidation." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. The trap was set. All that remained was waiting for Karen to walk into it. That evening, I sat on my porch and watched the sun set behind those concrete barriers. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I could breathe again. Karen had spent months making me feel powerless and afraid. She had used her badge to turn my life into a living hell. But she had made one critical mistake. She had assumed that I would never fight back. She had believed that her authority made her untouchable. Tomorrow, she was going to learn how wrong she had been. I raised my coffee cup in a toast to those ugly concrete blocks. "Thank you, Karen," I said out loud. "You just gave me everything I need to destroy you." The mountain echoed back my words like a promise. Wednesday morning brought Karen to my door one final time. But this Karen was different from the confident bully who had been terrorizing me for months. This Karen looked worried. I heard her truck coming up the mountain and watched through my window as she parked at the concrete barriers. She climbed out slowly, like someone walking to their own execution. I met her at my front door with a cup of coffee in my hands and a smile on my face. "Good morning, Karen," I said pleasantly. "Beautiful day, is it not?" She stared at me with suspicious eyes, clearly thrown off by my cheerful demeanor. "We need to talk," she said. "Of course we do. Please come up on the porch. Can I get you some coffee?" Karen climbed the steps slowly, studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "I got a call from the county attorney's office yesterday," she said. "Did you now? How interesting. They are asking questions about the survey I used to block your driveway. Questions about the legal authority I used to install those barriers." I took a sip of my coffee and nodded thoughtfully. "I imagine they are. County attorneys tend to ask lots of questions when citizens file formal complaints." The color drained from Karen's face. "You filed a complaint against me." "Oh, I filed several complaints," I replied casually. "Abuse of authority, harassment, property theft, fraudulent use of legal documents, the list goes on." Karen's hands were shaking now. She tried to maintain her authoritative posture, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. "Look," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Maybe we can work something out." "Work something out," I repeated. "You mean like the compromise I suggested when you first made your ridiculous claim about my driveway?" "I was just protecting my property rights," she said defensively. I set down my coffee cup and pulled out a folder that I had been waiting weeks to show her. "Speaking of property rights, Karen, I have something very interesting to share with you." I opened the folder and spread the documents across my porch table. Survey maps, property records, county regulations. "It turns out that your little survey was not quite accurate," I said, watching her face as the implications became clear. "In fact, it was completely fraudulent." Karen stared at the papers with growing horror. "That is impossible. I had it done by a licensed surveyor." "You had it done by your brother-in-law who lost his surveying license 3 years ago for falsifying documents," I replied. "Did you really think I would not check?" The fight went out of Karen like air from a punctured balloon. She sank into one of my porch chairs and put her head in her hands. "But that is not even the best part," I continued, unable to keep the satisfaction out of my voice any longer. "The best part is what happens to your property now that these barriers are in place." Karen looked up at me with genuine fear in her eyes. "What do you mean?" I pulled out one more document, a county notice that had been prepared but not yet served. According to County Regulation 847B, all residential properties must maintain legal access to public roads. Properties without legal access can be declared uninhabitable. I handed her the notice. "Congratulations, Karen. By blocking my driveway, you have made your own property legally inaccessible. The county is required to condemn it within 30 days unless legal access is restored." Karen read the notice twice, her face growing paler with each word. "This cannot be legal," she whispered. "Oh, it is very legal. You see, when the original properties were surveyed 50 years ago, your house was built with the understanding that it would use the shared access route, the same route that runs directly through my driveway." I leaned forward and looked her directly in the eyes. "You have been so busy trying to steal my driveway that you never realized you need it more than I do." Karen was quiet for a long moment, staring at those concrete barriers like they were her own gravestone. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" I smiled, the same cold smile she had given me so many times over the past few months. "I want you to remove those barriers. Today. I want you to file a formal apology with the county for your harassment campaign. And I want you to transfer to a different department where you cannot abuse your authority against innocent citizens." "And if I refuse?" "Then you lose your house, your job, and probably your freedom when the state attorney general's office finishes investigating your pattern of corruption." Karen stood up slowly, like an old woman carrying the weight of her mistakes. "I will have the barriers removed this afternoon," she said. "I thought you might see it that way," I replied. As she walked back to her truck, I called out one final message. "Oh, and Karen, next time you want to steal someone's driveway, you might want to make sure you understand property law first." She did not look back. The barriers came down that same afternoon. I watched from my porch as a county crew loaded those ugly concrete blocks onto their truck and drove them away. Each block that disappeared felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Karen supervised the removal with the defeated posture of someone who had lost everything that mattered to her. She did not look up at my house once during the entire process. The formal apology arrived by certified mail the next morning. It was brief and grudging. but it was signed by Sheriff Karen Mitchell and witnessed by County Attorney Rebecca Martinez. More importantly, it was accompanied by a letter from the Sheriff's Department announcing Karen's transfer to a desk job in the Traffic Violations Division. No more badge, no more authority, no more power to abuse. The news spread through our small mountain community faster than wildfire. Within a week, everyone knew what Karen had tried to do and how spectacularly it had backfired. The neighbors who had been avoiding me suddenly remembered how to wave and smile. Mrs. Henderson stopped by with a casserole and an apology. "I should have known better than to believe those stories she was spreading," she said. "You have been nothing but a good neighbor for 20 years." Other neighbors came forward with their own stories of Karen's harassment. It turned out I was not her only victim. She had been systematically bullying anyone she thought was weak enough to push around. But I was the first one to push back. The state attorney general's investigation revealed a pattern of corruption that went back years. Karen had been using her position to settle personal grudges, intimidate political opponents, and enrich herself through various schemes. My case was just the tip of the iceberg. She was quietly forced to retire rather than face criminal charges. A small mercy that she did not deserve, but one that allowed the county to avoid a larger scandal. As for me, I had my driveway back. More than that, I had my peace back. I spent the following weekend walking every inch of that winding path, remembering why I had fallen in love with it in the first place. Each curve told a story. Each stone held a memory. It was not just a driveway. It was a testament to what one person could build with their own hands and determination. Karen's house went up for sale 2 months later. I heard she moved to another state where no one knew her story. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had destroyed her own life in pursuit of something that was never hers to take. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful for the lesson she had taught me about standing up to bullies. Grateful for the reminder that ordinary citizens still have power when they are willing to use it. Grateful for the community that rallied around me once they knew the truth. On quiet evenings, I still sit on my porch and look down that beautiful driveway. Sometimes, I raise my coffee cup in a toast to those concrete barriers that taught Karen what justice looks like. She thought she could use her badge to steal my life's work. Instead, she handed me everything I needed to reclaim it. The mountain remembers everything, and it has a long memory for justice.